Welcome to the Purpose and Possibility podcast. This is your host, Laura Murphy, founder of Embody. Join me for inspiring conversations with people who are living on purpose, living into their purpose, and who just might open you up to new and bigger possibility. Welcome back to the Purpose and Possibility podcast. This is your host, Laura Murphy. Before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that the work that I do through this podcast and through the parent company Embody takes place on the unceded and occupied territory of the Coast Salish people, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I highly encourage you to take a moment to reflect on and do some research on the land that you play on, that you live on, and that you work on. Today's guest is a very dear friend of mine, Christine Banno. She is literally one of the most intuitive people I have ever met. She's also I've never met someone who can get an intuitive hit on an offering that she needs to birth into this world and go do it. It is so inspiring from the perspective of being an entrepreneur, of being someone who just, witnessing her really, really just go after her dreams. I'm also so inspired by Christine because of her willingness to dive into the work. In the spiritual community, we hear a lot around, quote unquote, the work. What is it? We dive deep into that in today's episode, talking a lot about her experience and her journey with what we call shadow work and inner child work, which, if this is your first time hearing it, this is work we all should be doing. And essentially, if you've heard my previous episode about getting curious about, becoming the curious explorer of your life, that is the very beginning of shadow work. Wondering why you react the way you do, wondering, the beliefs that you have and the stories that you tell and all sorts of things like that. So we dive deep into what shadow work is and how to begin working through it. And I think we're just going to jump into the episode. It's a good one, so I really hope you enjoy. Before we jump in, I would be honored if you could rate and review or share this podcast with anyone who you feel it should resonate with. Enjoy. So Christine, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm so excited that we get to connect. Not only do I know you in my personal life, I follow you in the online world and just love watching the progression of you as you iterate into yourself. And for those listening, Christine inspires me so much in how connected she is and how willing you are to listen to that voice, that knowing inside of you. And I know sometimes it doesn't come easy, but you really inspire me to do that. You are also someone, I've never met someone in my entire life who can download and quote unquote, download a program and just do it. And literally, I've never seen anything like it. And you just do it and get it done. And it's incredible. So welcome.
God, I'm going to cry. That is.
I feel my tears almost here. So why don't we start? This is something new that I've started, and let's just take a breath together because I just really want this to be heart-centered. So breathing in and out. Why don't we start with an easy question? And I just want to know what you're celebrating today.
What am I celebrating? I love celebrating things. I love that you asked me that question because celebration has been something that I've really incorporated. I used to really bypass anything happening in my life. It's just so easy to be like, oh yeah, I did that. Sure. Next, whatever. What's the next thing? And because our desires are always shifting and evolving and getting bigger, like every time we hit something, it's like, okay, next, what's my next thing? What's my next big goal? So it's celebrating and anchoring in my gratitude has been such a beautiful practice. But anyways, to get to the point, I'm just celebrating myself today. I actually went, I know you can't see this right now because this will be on audio, but I actually went to Granville Island and got myself the most.
Oh, how beautiful. Do you know hydrangeas are my favorite flowers on the planet? Next to peonies and hydrangeas.
So I went Island, and I walk by, and I often will get flowers to my clients on their birthdays. And I was just like walking by Granville Island Market here in Vancouver, and I looked over at this, said like the farmer's like special bouquet, and I walked by and I was like, oh, $50. Like, I don't really need a bouquet like that, or like, do I really need flowers? And I was like, Christine, you just spent like the last 2.5 hours completely redefining your website. You're celebrating a brand new launch of your intuition container. You're celebrating finishing the last 3 months of the transformation container. You're like, I had massive clarity last night about, you know, really redefining who I am in my branding and like all this different stuff. And I just was like, buy the fucking flowers. Like,
buy the flowers.
Buy the flowers. So I like went in and I was just like that bunch and like the roses and just, it's like one of those, it's just stunning. And I'm celebrating, I think, myself and the connection that I have and just the amount of work. Like, I think writing my website copy, it was so cool to reflect as I was writing, you know, some of my journey and, you know, what I used to see as the gong show of my life and how the way I did things really didn't make sense to a lot of people. And so rather than living in shame, it was really like celebrating myself and actually like the way in which I operate and the quirks and all the things I've been through and all the lessons and all the things. So
it's always it's always in the like what we think is the gong show is all the gifts, right? So one of the things that also inspires me about you is your willingness to do the work. And we can get into this because I know it's going to be definitely in the containers that you've built, and we'll talk about that. But I want to know, and you can answer this any way you want. It's who's Christine?
Oh, I am first like thing that comes in is like a fire starter, an activator, a catalyst, like spicy. It's like I just am so in love with life. Like, I'm just so in love. I used to feel so much despair and so much like depression, anxiety, overwhelm, and I've really learned to embrace life and really come home many times to the fact that I'm this soul with unique essence living in this meat suit in Earth School and just playing a lot more and having a lot more fun. So I really believe I'm here to activate and elevate people. The word light workers really comes in. So if you know what that means, then you know. But I'm here, what that means is essentially like I'm here to activate and elevate people. So I believe I'm here to be a catalyst for people for rapid transformation in both personal and professional. Like, I do a lot of business mentorship now, and I help people align back with their mission and why they're here. Because I know what it's like to be very out of alignment with who I am and the way in which I operate. And it was not good. That was the point. I was like depressed, over functioning with chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, living on EI, and literally like had no idea if I was going to like make it through. I was like, you know, just opened a startup business, was like drowning in debt, had, you know, separated from a relationship, separated from a business partnership, and was like, oh, and I was pregnant. So I literally was like, I might die. I might be like on Teen Mom. Like, I might need to like apply for one of these shows. And from there, I mean, I just trusted and I did a lot of the hard work. And, you know, I was just writing this on my website, but I was like, to go from that and to now be living in alignment with my purpose. And I mean, that was definitely a journey in itself, but coming home to who I am, and my authenticity has proven, I mean, just incredible. Like, it's going, you know, it still blows my mind, you know, every single month when I see new clients come in and I'm having like celebrating 20, 30K months. Like, it blows my fucking mind, because I'm just like, all this whole thing about people, this whole talk about just come back into alignment with who you are, and like abundance and wealth and fun and freedom are on the other side. And I was like, yeah, fuck you, whatever. I don't trust any of it. And then actually doing it and going through that journey and experiencing what it's like to live with a lot of freedom is actually, it's so freaking cool.
So talk to us a bit about that. So the journey from like this person who was like, I need to apply for these reality shows, my life is so messed up, to, you know, being fully in alignment with your heart and literally sharing so the way I see you is like, you see the light in others, and it's like you can mirror it back to them and help them get there. So talk to us a little bit about that journey.
exactly what you said. You nailed it. I can read people's energy and I can read their blueprint. I believe that every person on this planet has a blueprint inside of them, and that we're sort of coded for our excellence. And I feel like I can tap into that when I work with people, which is really fun because I can meet somebody and they're like, yeah, I just don't know if I can, what I should do with my life. And I was like, well, I got a couple ideas. And they're like, what? We're like, what? So let me take some notes. So like, you know what I mean? I'll be sitting, I have to turn it on and off though. Cause I'll be sitting with somebody at dinner, like a girlfriend, and this girl was from Toronto, and she was just sitting beside me, and like all I kept hearing with spirit was like, she's a creative. She's got to do her own like clothing line. She's going to open a boutique. This is the name of it. And I was like, oh my God, like let's just, so I like learned to kind of how to do it. But anyways, back to your question. As you can see, I go on multiple tangents.
It's awesome. I love it.
So the journey home was not fun. It's been a very wild, I'd say like 11 years of personal development, hundreds of thousands of dollars of like mentorships and like shadow work and inner child work. And the way that I can say it is that like, I believe we reincarnate, I believe we come on this planet and we have these lessons, and we choose our parents, and we have these like perfect scenarios of fuckery to basically put us in the fog. Like it's kind of like conditioning, and depending on where we're born and color of our skin, like there's just so many factors that play into this, and it's like, it creates this perfect cocktail of the fog, which is what I call it, where it's sort of like, we just kind of like live life. It's like, okay, so you go to school, and based on our parents' beliefs and our authority figures, and whether we're, with church, like all the different factors, religion, things that can play into it. And I find that what happens is that I was operating from a place of just like, I was bullied as a kid, and I had lots of different things happen. Like it was just, I was overweight and was bullied pretty heavily, and felt a lot of shame in my body, and just felt like I had really was wandering through life and was feeling very like foggy. Like I just didn't feel like I had great self-esteem. I felt very low a lot. I wasn't athletic. I was the youngest of 3 kids. And even though my mom stayed home and she was amazing, she's an intuitive as well. But it was just that my dad was supporting 3 kids in our family. So I experienced, I think, a lot of messaging around lack and around, we don't have money for this. And I think I picked up a lot of those beliefs. So I see it as, we do a lot of our subconscious programming from ages 0 to 7. And so I really, I think we pick up a lot of crap essentially that isn't ours. It's sort of like, it clouds our vessels and it clouds our truth. And it's sort of like wearing a bunch of bulky winter clothes, like all the time. And we're just like, I can't breathe. I'm so hot. This is not even mine. And so I just found that by my 20s, I was just like lost. Like I got engaged when I was 19. I dated a ton of, I had a history of dating addicts. I was codependent. I didn't believe I had any power. And so I just found myself kind of clinging to relationship. And then it wasn't until I was kind of in one of my many rock bottoms, where I really woke up to, I would call it my spiritual awakening, that I was like really at the lowest of the low. Like I was having chronic stress and they call it brownouts. It's basically like I would drive to the airport, and I was supposed to be driving to my grandma's house, just really out of body, really disembodied. I disassociated a lot. I was just really kind of, didn't have very many coping skills, a lot of tools, a lot of stuff like that. And then I woke up to this program, and they were basically it was a program for partners of addicts. And my partner at the time was in a treatment center. And I remember them saying, I was so resistant towards it. And they were just okay, so we're going to talk about you and your patterns and your this. And I was like, oh no, I think you have, I think you're mistaken. I'm actually not the one with the problem. And they were like, oh, sweetheart, you have the problem. And I was like, they're like, you're codependent. And I was like, huh? What? Code what? I'd never even heard of it. So I remember having this big gong to the head. And then at that place I just was waking up from sleep one morning, and I was half crying, and had a nightmare / dream about just a traumatic event that had happened. And I felt this energy come through me. It was just I can only describe it as God force energy, but it was essentially just it came through my hand. And just to be to preface this, if somebody said the word God or like anything through the religion, I would have literally, not that I don't practice religion, but if anyone had mentioned the word God, I literally would have like shriveled and been like, shut the fuck up. Like I had such an adverse like couldn't, not describable. I don't even know where it would come from, but it was just so incredibly like adverse. So comical, of course. So I felt this like God energy, whatever you want to call it, course through my body. And it was the first moment where I experienced like my channels opening up. It was like I visualized, I felt, I saw, I knew, like it was just all my clairs kind of just popped all at once. And from there, it just launched me into this like 11-year journey of coming home. And I started with spirituality as my like primary focus, because I found that spirituality was a great tool for me to help see a bigger picture and like kind of come to terms with like it was like a safety raft, or like it was like a life raft at the time. So it's like everything happens for a reason. There's this divine intervention. But the issue, well, I don't say the issue, but the thing was that I really kind of got heavily into spiritually bypassing, which is
very common. Very early in the journey.
Yeah. Right. So it was like, I had found this new hope, and in all honesty, it was perfect for the time I was in, because I just had a lot of unprocessed trauma I wasn't ready to deal with. So I just sort of like went into that world, and I started it was my first taste of having creative downloads, creative hits, getting woken up in the middle of the night with like flowing information. So it was a really exciting time. But what I noticed was a lot of the tools and a lot of the things like meditation and stuff, they were sort of like temporary band-aids over top of a lot of like trauma and a lot of like really so my system and my body were very frozen. The word I use is frozen, but it was like very frozen. And so what happened is that I wasn't able, people talked about abundance, they talked about they use affirmations, and I was using a lot of these things. And what would happen is that I couldn't integrate. Like I couldn't integrate them. Like I was like, they don't work. Like, I'm going to affirm, I believe that I am abundant, or I believe that I can do this.
Yeah. But my bank account says otherwise.
My bank account says, and so there was a lot of that. And so I really went into this journey of, when I was ready, my nervous system, I think had sort of like calmed down a little bit. And I went through the process of what I call defrosting, which is like starting to look at, like, understand and realize that, yes, I am a spiritual being in human form, but I also have a body, and I also have a nervous system. And I really abandoned that. I mean, way longer than I can even imagine. I mean, I think I started freezing at the age of like probably, like 6, 7, when I was being bullied and stuff. I think I just disassociated. So it was something that was very long-standing. And so I really went into the journey of shadow work, like the depths of shadow work, and met like my greatest fears, and sat with my inner child, and, just the whole process of coming to terms with like radical self-responsibility and unhooking from the identity of a victim, and really just starting to be like, okay, this is like going to be really fucking hard work. But if this is true, that like we are the creators of our lives, and we are these like magical, majestic beings, then like, if I got myself into this shit, I can get myself out. So like, now that I'm more aware. So basically I did it. I worked with a ton of mentors. I invested a lot of money on myself, and just like really went in, and I went to therapists and psychotherapists and hypnotists and spiritual teachers, and this, for like literally you name it. But I realized, because I was so frustrated. I was like, I just can't seem to get it. Like there's something always missing wherever I go. And so I realized now, like I had to kind of travel into all modalities and all places and all the things, so that I could essentially steer myself back home, and then now teach this, because I've been through so much of it. So the cool thing is that even though it took me, let's say, 11 years to go through this process, and however much money and time and energy, what I'm seeing right now with clients, and what I believe to be true for us, is that when we have people who have embodied or have been through like the storm and the dark nights of the soul, and have come out and are thriving, I believe we become, like you are, and like I am, and like so many people we know, we become these like calibration portals. So when people are working with us, or their inner energy, our energy sort of elevates their belief systems, and all of a sudden they can like collapse time on how quickly they can transform. So I see it like now, like where people, clients will all of a sudden have these breakthroughs, or they'll have these things happen in like a couple months, where it took me like 11 years, right? So it's just like, it's so cool to see how humans can start to calibrate to one another, and how we can start to have it be where we can have these transformations without having to have the time and energy, which is our most precious resources.
So. Wow. You said a few things and I'm like, was like filing them in my mind. I want to come back to you. So if someone is hearing the words like inner child work and shadow work for the first time, like what is that?
Ooh, I remember a therapist.
No big deal. It's like
no. I remember a therapist asked me one time, this is before I had sort of woken up to this work. She was like, so how was your childhood? And I was like, bitch, this is not about my childhood. This is about now.
I am here.
My boyfriend who's pissing me off, and it's his problem, and we got to talk about it. And I was just like,
why does this always happen to me?
why does it happen to me? Anyways, okay. So shadow work I see as everyone has a shadow. Okay. People also call this parts work. Some personalities, archetypes, there's lots of different sort of names for it. But Carl Jung was the one who sort of really brought it into the Western world. But it's such powerful work, and it's something that a lot of people who I work with don't necessarily love to go into because they think it's going to be very scary. And it is, sometimes it is. When you've been running from a voice in your head for a very long time, to go and just like turn your ass around and be like, fuck it, come at me. Like, what do you want to say? Right. And I used to fight it. And the more we fight it, the more we give it power. So essentially it's like the parts of ourselves that we deny, we reject, that we deem unlovable, the parts of ourselves that if anybody knew this, they wouldn't love me, or they wouldn't, you know what I mean? So I see it as, and it's tender, like even saying that right now, just there's like this like tenderness in my heart, right?
I feel it too. I actually like feel tears like ready to come.
Right? It's like the part, it's the thing, I think of it as like this, like there's the parts of us who are very happy to, we like the shiny parts. It's like the Instagram reel. Hi, I'm Christine Banno. I'm an intuitive business mentor. I'm a Lululemon
awesome
ambassador.
life.
Yeah, I'm a Lululemon ambassador. I have a daughter. I have a dog. I got a Frenchie. I like live my life. # best life in North Vancouver. Okay, so I feel like the parts that I'm like super # proud of. Okay, and then there's like the parts that I tuck away and I lock in the basement. Right, like the parts of ourselves. And until I went in and dove into that work, it's like the part of, the parts that I locked away when I was really in like the fog was like the part of me who was super manipulative, the part of me who lashed out at partners, who would be super like so happy-go-lucky to people to make them like me. And then I would go and like freak out, right? Or I would, sit there and judge people, or I would, talk shit about somebody like that we have, or, the part of me when I was younger who stole like jewelry when I save on food. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like these parts of ourselves that we don't like. It's like the ones, and I think of it as like, you have somebody over for dinner and you're like, come look at my beautiful home. And then somebody's like, oh, hey, do you mind if I like go back and see the yard? And you're like, no.
Not back there.
Don't go back there, and don't go in the basement, because there's lots of voices down there. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's the parts of ourselves that we deem unlovable, we deny, we reject it. And so when we can start to, the thing is that, and we often pick those, our shadow often is developed in childhood. So it does relate a lot to inner child work. But for example, let's say there's a child who's very sensitive. So let's say they're empathic and they've got a lot of sensitivities. If they get the messaging, depending on the level of consciousness of their parent or the caretaker or the authority figure, if they say to that child, you're too sensitive. You stop crying. You're too sensitive. Just get over it. Like, shut your mouth, whatever they say, right? That child, yeah, right. That child in that moment will then go and they'll start to learn, because their role is to have their needs and their like base needs met, right? From a survival perspective. And so we don't have the awareness and the emotional intelligence at that age to be like, you know what? Mom and Dad, I think you're having a bit of a bad day. I'm gonna do me, because I am powerful and strong, and I'm a powerful, limitless creator. Like, we're not co-creating with our parents, we're co-creating the universe, we're co-creating with our parents, and we just need to get our needs met. So we will adapt, kids will adapt to receive the love that they ultimately need. But what happens is that child will then go and shut that part of themselves down. So they're essentially saying that part of me is not safe. And so we lock it away, never to be seen again. But the problem is that is part of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime later in life, if somebody says, oh, you're so sensitive, guess what? We're like, people will like lash out. They'll freak out. They'll get super triggered. They'll be like, no, I'm not. You didn't. Well, you're a fucking asshole. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's the parts of ourselves that we lock away. And the thing is then let's say you're on social media and you see somebody who's really out there and is like really owning their sensitivity and they're like who they are. Then oftentimes that's when we'll go and we'll judge the person and be like, you know, or if we go on to have children and our kids are sensitive, usually it goes one of two ways. We'll either like replay the trauma that happened to us and we'll say like, well, stop crying and stop doing that thing because we have no tolerance for it because we, you know what I mean? It's like the domino effect. Or we go the opposite direction where we kind of like overcaught, you know what I mean? Like it's just, there's usually something there. So shadow work is meeting the parts of yourself that have been locked away for a very long time. And the thing that was scary for me is that there was like, I denied and like made fun of, the girl who was chubby and overweight. Like I used to, like me and my friends used to like look at pictures and I was like, ew, look how gross I am. Like I'm so fat and like saying all these things. And so let's just say when I met my shadow, she's a little pissed. She's a little
I remember that.
right? Because basically what's happening is you know, the inner child is the part of us who has, and again, everyone's sort of got this little version of us who experiences things, and because you know, we're so young, we don't have tools and we don't have the sort of like ability at that point to decipher people and their own pain. Like we're not like, oh, I think that person's in pain and that's why they're being such an asshat to me right now. Kids are like, oh my God, I'm broken. Oh my God, I'm unlovable. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And so they take things at face value and it just goes, they're like sponges. So it goes into the subconscious. And then what happens is when we're older, we will tend to go and replay these wounds out until they're tended to, right? It's like a physical wound, we would never leave just an open gash, right? We'd be like, we know it's going to get infected. But our emotional, you know, mental wounds, it's like, put them away. I don't want to deal with them, right? But so it's just, I see it time and time again when I'm working with people, is that why I believe it's so important to do this work, as well as see their highest potential, is because it doesn't matter if I see somebody's highest potential if they're not on board with it, if they don't believe it. So the work we do is I can access it, but then it's also like bringing them, excavating sort of like the stories and looking at the wounding and looking at the unconscious mind of what's there. Because I mean, there's brilliant people with so many creations and so many programs and books and like everything they want to bring into the world. But I see it time and time again. They'll get to a certain point and then their shadow will come up and be like, you can't do it. You're a piece of shit. Everyone's going to laugh at you. Everyone's going to And so this is where I work with people to disentangle that. So we really remove blocks, and it allows people to then go into their dreams, because the inner child's trying to keep us safe. The shadow is trying to keep us safe. So I think of like, it is like the inner child is like, has been wounded to some degree. And so when we're about to go do something big, she like presses the detonator and the shadow comes out. The shadow comes out to protect us. And so the shadow, people think the shadow is a bad thing. And I'm like, the shadow is actually trying to keep you safe. The shadow, its role is actually to try to scare you to not go do that big thing. Because if you do that big thing, that little, you know, child is petrified it's going to get laughed at again or bullied or whatever the thing is. So this is why I see so many people being held back from their dreams, is because they haven't tended to those tender parts of them who actually just need a lot of love.
And it takes you right back to that being that 6, 10, 12-year-old or whatever it was. And like, if you want to know where to do shadow work, look where you react to like the same as you did when you were 6.
I mean, people from relations all the time. They're like, you're acting like a 2-year-old. And it's like, they actually are legit, like probably acting like a 2-year-old, right? Because our wounds get activated and triggers and it's all the things, right? So it's powerful. It's powerful. I mean, and shadow work is a sort of a consistent thing. And something I talk about a lot is just like, if you're on the journey of living your most expanded life, when you can kind of come to terms, like when I always say to my clients, like when they get to know me more, I'm like, when your shadow comes up and all the shit starts to hit the fan, I said, we're onto something really big, because it's in your comfort zone is where your shadow and your inner child are like having a little snap and putting the feet up, doing the thing. We feel safe. And then when we go to like, every time I go to launch a container or I go to do something big or expand myself, and claim new space, guess what happens? Like, it's like, I will come up with all the voices. You can't do this. Nobody cares. Christine, you're fat. Nobody gives a shit about you. Like, people literally don't care. Like, you should just stop. You should definitely just stop. It's a bad idea. What if nobody buys? Like, all the things. And when that happens, rather than get angry and be like, go away, I am going to sell. Fuck you. Like, don't eat, blah, blah, blah. I actually, like, the worst thing you can do. So I actually, like, sit down and I usually breathe and I invite the shadow in, and I usually like invite the shadow and the inner child to the dinner table. And I'm like, I'm so here for you right now. Like, what would you have me know? And usually the shadow's like, you're this and you're that. And I usually let it, like, rant, because I'm like, okay, like, I let it go on a rant. I know it's not true, but I just let it, I just will journal. Because at the end of it, the shadow slows down, because it can only berate me for so long. And then out comes the inner child. And usually the inner child will look at me, and I'll bring her onto my lap, and I'll just say, like, what's going on? And she'll be like, I'm so scared. I'm so scared, because if you do this and you go out and you show yourself to the world, people could bully us. People could tell us that we're wrong. People could do these things. And so there's so much love and tenderness. Cause I'm like, oh my God, my body and my, like, mind and my, like, psyche are so brilliant. Like, they're coded to keep me safe. So thank goodness that they're doing their job. I love you. I'm still going to move forward though. Right. Like, I love you, and let me show you that I'm this, like, I can handle people now. If somebody says something about me, like, it's okay. It's not about me. It's about that person, right? Like, I've learned that through emotional intelligence, that their pain or their projection on me has nothing to do with me. It's about them. Right? That's been a lot of, like, learning as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we all need to take a page out of that book. It's so interesting that one of the biggest pieces of resistance that I also see in the work that I do is people are afraid of what doing the shadow work is going to open up.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm like, I just want you to see that, like, you are now the adult, you're not the child, and then you get to choose differently. How do you deal with people like that, who are like, I have this big dream, I want to do this thing, and you can clearly see, because just like I can, when I hold space for someone, I can see the blocks. I can, like, very clear to me, this is where you're blocked. But they're afraid to, like, start doing the work. Where would you say they begin?
I find, for me, by giving a lot of personal examples, like, for example, one of my girlfriends, Kelsey Grant, you probably know her as Radical Self-Love on Instagram, but she runs a beautiful container and on relationships, and she asked me to do a shadow work workshop for her container. And so I went in and did that, and I really, like, dove in. It was, like, one of those brilliant things. But I found that I had some really good feedback, and some people were like, your real life examples have helped me so much. Because I think the thing is that when you dive in and you Google shadow work, or you go in and you, like, just look at it, it's like, oh, it's 24 degrees outside on a beautiful day. Do I want to go out and, like, go shopping, or go to the beach, or go, like, numb out and do something and go and sit in the patio and have margaritas? Or do I want to sit and find out all the ways I'm a piece of shit? Like, that's what people think, right? They're just like, yeah, you know what I mean? And so the thing is that it requires a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. And I find by letting people know and reminding them that, like, your greatest life and your most expanded life lives on the other side of these fears. And these fears are not, like, this part of you is not here to terrorize you. It might feel that way because you haven't looked at it. Like, imagine you've locked an animal in the closet for decades. Can you imagine when that thing comes out of the closet? It's going to be like rabied. It's going to have, like, it's going to be pissed. It's going to be like, I'm part of you. How could you deny me? Like, how could you deny me? Like, how could, like, that's a part of us, right? So we can never really be whole if we have, like, holes, HOLES, like, holes in us, right? Like, if we have missing pieces of who we are, how do we ever fully show up in the world? And when we can claim, like, now the fact that I can claim those parts of me, I can go out and actually, like, I'm not afraid of what somebody says about me. Cause I'm like, there's nothing my shadow hasn't said to me that I can, like, be afraid of some troll on the internet. Like, I literally am, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it would hurt, but I would just say to people that, it's not, like, remembering that if you die, I think, okay, let me just say this with me. Working with somebody who's skilled in shadow work, I find, can be very helpful. I don't I'm sure there's people who do shadow work alone, but I find that working with somebody who has some skill or has been through it themselves is very powerful and helpful, because they can help guide you through the process and hold you in that space, right? You know what I mean?
I 1,000% agree. And I think one of the most important things in working with someone, whether it's a therapist or a coach or whatever it is, and I think one of the most healing things is to know that you're not alone, is to know that like these things that I hold like shame around, or, you know, or embarrassed of, or these parts of me that I don't want to look at. I like, and I do this on my coaching calls, which it's a group call. And I'm like, when someone expresses how they feel, I'm like, I would love for anyone else who feels like this to raise their hand. And I can guarantee you every single other person on the call will raise their hand. And it's just like this sense of relief of like, I am not alone. And I think like that's the beautiful part. And I think the other thing is like, and you touched on this about when you were talking about spiritual bypassing, is that I think sometimes when we first jump into the work of like the spiritual work and doing quote unquote the work, we're like, I'm going to heal all my traumas and I'm going to do all the things. You don't rush the healing. Like this is a lifetime. You know what I mean? It's not like the type A, the hustler in us is like, I want to get to the resolution and I want to get to the other side. And it is so not the journey.
Well, tick the process. I mean, that's what we talked about in my transformation containers, where we do a lot of this human work, is that they're like, I knew there was a part of you who just wanted to tick it off. So I like looked like a good student. And I was like, I'm so glad that you brought that to the light. Right. Because I mean, that's the thing, is a lot of us are very programmed in our masculine energy to do the thing and to tick the thing and to tick the box. And I think that's why sometimes people are frustrated with group containers or group, like self-study courses and things like that, is that like I find the power of having, you're not alone, right? Like in the container of having like, you're not alone, you know, and seeing other people going through it is so powerful. Like it just reminds you that you're so held, and that everyone, you know, even though if their life looks super shiny on the outside, like everyone's got their stuff. Like
everyone has their shit.
Every human is flawed. Every person has their shit. Every person has insecurities. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's such a journey. And like you beautifully said, it's like a process of, you know, I really tried to flip it of seeing myself like, or seeing, you know, like, oh, where I'm at is not good, or I'm broken, or I'm this, and I'm like labeling these like, you know, and it's like, what if we can just flip it and say like, what if it's not about me being broken? Like, what about like where I am is perfect, but I desire a new level of consciousness. Like I desire a bigger life. Like where I'm at isn't bad. It's just like, there's new levels. I can always unlock new levels, but that's up to me, and that's choice. And one of my mentors, Melanie Ann Lair, talks a lot about, like, she's like, evolution and growth over a lifetime. Like this is when we see ourselves as this, like, okay, in 3 months, I've got to completely transform, and like, that's it, right? There's a time limit on it. And I think when you just see yourself as this beautiful work in progress for the rest of your life, and you'll always be unlocking new layers, which will create new problems and new fun and all the things, and new shadow and all that. Like, but I think the thing is that there's, when, you know, I see it as like going in, and I think you know, like I trust that if you're out there and you have a feeling of like, I just know I'm meant for something more than what I'm doing. There's like a niggle, there's like a undertow, there's a rumble, there's something inside of you. It's like, what am I so afraid of looking at? Is there, you know, do I actually have awareness around myself? How do I act? How do I respond? Like that, just the start of the journey of self-awareness about like, you know, that self-responsibility piece is it's a catch-22, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to be responsible. I remember there's times I said to my coach, I was like, I wish I didn't peek behind the curtain sometimes. Like
I say this often. I was like, it was so much easier when I didn't know.
When I'm in the fog, when I'm in the fog and I'm, you know, when I was able to just blame and be a victim, I was like, oh, there's just such a lovely piece about that. I mean, I was miserable and sick, but there was just also this like, when I see it now as well, as like, we're human, taking breaks and allowing ourselves to be human. Like there's days, you know, I spend, you know, majority of my days just like lit up and, you know, serving and doing all the things. And then there's times, you know, I used to laugh on like Friday nights when I'd go and like go down, get some Beautiful, go and get a cookie and a freaking like, you know, sit on the couch and watch like X on the beach. And I was just like, this is amazing. So I think kind of like allowing ourselves these moments of, you know, like grace and taking breaks. And it's not a sprint to get to this finish line of some destination of like, okay, I'm healed and now I can do the thing. It's like always, always, always accessing new levels and layers of ourselves. So it's kind of fun, like looking at it as like this journey. And yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because you are literally one of the most intuitive people I've ever met. What would you say to someone who's like, I think I'm intuitive, I don't know if I trust it, you know, like what advice would you give to someone who's like just starting to lean into their intuition?
I'm going to take my intuition container.
Talk to us about that. Tell us about that.
I know, yeah. I'm totally like not plugging myself like an asshole. But this is the reason why, right? Because the reason I created containers. So right now, I mean, my offerings are literally changing. I'm a manifestor by human design. So it's just like, boom, this idea. And so I'm rapidly changing things. But
and you like do it. You do. I like
do it. Right now in my business, I offer a transformation container, which is, it's called accessing your personal power. So it's all like blocks, beliefs, stories, triggers, shadow work, inner child work, forgiveness. It's like the meat and potatoes of that healing journey. And we really go into it. And I make the work fun. Like I make it fun. Like even though we're talking about shadow inner child, we're still laughing at time. You know what I mean? Like we try to make it as light as possible. So that's that. And then the next that's like step one, which is sort of like, I call it the excavation, which is really just clearing your vessel. Because the next step that I have is step two, which is like, you know, activating your vessel, which is around, it's called the intuition container, but it's like making the spiritual world easy to understand. And it's like bridging the gap between the human and the spiritual world. Because when I was in that world, I was just so lost. Like I felt like a lot of the concepts and principles, like some of them I could understand and integrate. There was just some that were so far for me. You know what I mean? Like every person on this planet is intuitive. Every person on this planet has magic and like psychic abilities. And I believe that, right? I believe that every person has like a potent medicine inside of them just waiting to come to life. But when we're so bogged down with stories and bitterness and all these things, it's so hard to access that. So this this container is all about, the modules are fun. It's like it's a 3-month program. It's like, we start with a retreat, which I always do, which I love because it's a live retreat with me, which is just kind of collects the energy, gets everyone on the same page. And then we do 11 weekly calls. So it's just an hour. And on the call, we do processes and journal prompts. So there's not a lot of extra, like it's just kind of like a nice compact. But we go into like intuition one-on-one. Like the first module is like, why the fuck do I care? Like I you know what I mean? Like I go in that because I'm like, there's people who are like skeptic or like, I don't have intuition or this and that. Right. So it's like, why do I care? How do I use it? How do I receive information? So we go into like, kind of like the basics of intuition and like energy. We go into energy principles. We go into, I tie in a lot of like neuroscience with Dr. Joe Dispenza and like different people like that so that people can see like this energy hocus pocus. It's like, it's real. It's being measured in science. Like this is all really cool. So I bring in that aspect of it. We go into all things woo woo. We talk about mediums. We talk about, you know, what a channel is. We talk about all that, just kind of like deconstructing what the world is and make it in a very simple to understand way. And then we go into things like masculine, feminine energy and creativity, and play. And then we go into purpose and like finding out your mission and like reconnecting closer to the end of like finding out like, what are you here for and what do you want to do with it? So like cultivating your community and starting to like come to bring to life what you want. So that's the container. I'm launching it. It'll be starting the first retreat, I think is July 10th, or it's like that first kind of like couple weeks. So hopefully if this goes out before that, then somebody who hears it might want to join, but it's a really fun container. And so, but what I would say to somebody who's newly intuitive, or feeling like they're interested in this world is like, it's just like, you made it here for a reason. You made it, there's something there. Like I always trust that like our soul and our spirit is constantly guiding us and trying to lead us in the places that will light us up. And so I would just say that you are intuitive. Number one, if you're questioning, like, am I intuitive? I would just say that you're even asking that question means you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know you are. And just starting to play with really simple things, like, you know, if you get, because what I work with a lot of the people on is like, what's my ego voice? What's my intuitive voice? Like, and what I would say is your intuitive voice is, it's usually very like soft. It's just like a knowing often, like it lives in our gut or in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a thought insertion. It just sort of drops in. It's not chattery. It's not opinionated. It's not judgmental. It's not emotional. I mean, I think that's the thing is that, like, I used to sometimes get confused because I would feel emotional and then I would like be like, oh, that's my intuition. And it's actually non-emotional. It's like, it's just this sort of like just effortless information that comes through. Mm-hmm. And I would also look at what kind of state I'm in. Like if you're kind of trying to decipher that, I would say like, what kind of state are you in when you receive it? And where, because usually it's when we're leaned back and we're in our feminine energy, which is everyone, male or female or whatever you identify as, is everyone has masculine and feminine energy, but it's more in that like lean back energy. So for me, I download and I channel and I receive information when I'm in the forest, when I'm by the ocean. So those are two places that I find for me really bring me into alignment. And I download a lot in water. So if I'm in the bath or in the ocean, I get like tons of shower. Like I'll be sitting in the shower and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, like the name, you know what I mean? Like something will just come through. So I would just say like, you can start to play with really easy, effortless, in really easy and effortless ways. You can start to follow spiritual like teachers or guides or start reading books or one of my favorite books that I still refer back to sometimes and recommend. And I actually did a mentorship with her back in 2013 or 14. An author, a Hay House author named Rebecca Campbell. Her book, Light is the New Black. It's one of my favorite books. And it's like medicine. It's just so good. So that's a great, really easy to read, like great intro, you know what I mean? To your soul and all that kind of stuff. So she's amazing. But I would just say like, when you're in the state of play and when you're in the state of ease and you're in the state of lean back, and in that receiving energy, that's when you'll get the hits and that's when you'll get that. So if you receive something and you're in a state of absolute chaos and you're in the state of like fear, it's likely your intuition is not online. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's such an interesting distinction the way you said it, that it's soft. And it's really funny because when I am in teaching breathwork and I'm like, you know, be open to just like listening and hearing these things. And I'm always like, we expect our intuition to show up like the Morgan Freeman voice from like narrating The Lion King, like this voice of God kind of thing.
You are meant to do this with you.
And I'm like, it is a thought. That is all it is.
Like a whisper, a knowing, a feeling, you know, or when you meet somebody and you're like, oh yeah, no, we jammed before in past lives. Yeah. So I think you can feel it, right? You can feel that essence of somebody. And everyone, I mean, even the most logical people on the planet, I mean, there's so much science now coming and backing this. So I think there's, you know, definitely, I think there's a lot of fear too. People are scared, I think, to openly talk about their intuition. And that's why I also wanted to bring this container to life, because I'm like, it's just so fun to have a community where you can play and be like, did you see the eagles? You know, these are my spirit animals. Again, we don't go off the grid, because I found some of it where I was like, this is a little too much for me. And so I try to keep it pretty, like, I try to make it very bridging the gap, right? Between like your everyday human and also just like the spiritual world. Because I don't know about you, but I found there's definitely, sometimes it can go off into like the oblivion.
Sometimes it's a little too far for me.
I'm just like, whoa, or I'm like sitting there in the density of reading like one of Eckhart Tolle's books, which I love. I mean, I love his stuff and I've seen him live and so many things, but sometimes the density of like, I can't quite relate to the concepts and bring them into my life completely. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, oh, it doesn't really resonate for me. Like, maybe the world's not for me. And I'm like, it is for you. You can use your intuition for like where to go on traffic, or like what to eat tonight, or if that person's going to be a good like person, you know, maybe that can be a good friendship for you. So it's like, it's so valuable. And I live my life completely by intuition now. Like I trust it. Like I just go, and because I've done a lot of the human work, the messages of my soul are so clear now. And I think that's the coolest thing is that, and why I've launched the containers in the way that I do, sort of like a step 1, step 2, step 3, is because I believe that like my journey was all over the place. It was a shit show. I did spirituality, and then I dabbled in this, and then I did some shadow work, and then I went back. Like it was just this whole crazy mess. And so, not mess, it's beautiful, perfect. To teach it. But it's like that. I see that as like, if you can go in and be really fucking brave and go in and do that, like that, take care of your human and really do the human work. That process of listening to your intuitive voice becomes so clear, right? And this is why I think we see sometimes teachers or coaches or people in the industry who preach something, but there's not a lot of embodiment and integration in their own lives. And I think that people can feel that, right? And then they're like, oh, well, they don't even practice themselves. They talk about like woo-saw, and then they're off like, you know, slashing their boyfriend's tires. And I'm like, yeah, shit, well, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that we have, it's great to have, because I just see it as like, it's so valuable, because the messages that come through, it's not trying to fight with a bunch of static and noise and like, you know, it's been measured. I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza in one of his books was talking about how like we have this energy field that extends outside of us. And when we have a ton of trauma and a ton of things like bitterness and heavy, dense emotions, it like pulls our precious life force and like sucks it up inside. So we don't become energetic match. You know what I mean? Like we become very separate, feeling of separateness and alone and dense. And so I think doing this work is so valuable, because like, I just see it as like, clean up the shit, activate your superpowers, and get the fuck into, like, do what you can have everything you want in this life. It's easy to me, you know what I mean? It's just like, but I also have to learn that not everybody wants this journey, right? Like, I think that's the thing I've had to really step back from, is like, I'm not trying to convince people, but I'm like, oh, it's going to be, you know, like in my early days, I was like, this world of intuitiveness is amazing, and you can like have everything you want. And people are like, I don't want it right now. And I like leaning back and trusting that everyone has their own divine timing, alignment of when they're ready. And you know what I mean? Like just kind of that process as well, but it has been pretty interesting. So
yeah, it's definitely not our job to convince them to do the work. So I want to be conscious of your time. And I have some rapid fire questions just to end things off. And sometimes they're not rapid fire. They can be pretty deep, but, what does purpose mean to you?
Rapid fire? Nice rapid fire question.
I should have started with that one.
Like, what's your favorite ice cream? Okay. Sorry, say it again. What does purpose mean to me?
Yeah.
Purpose is, to me, the first thing that came in was like living in alignment with who you truly are. But the thing is that I think sometimes people, and I know for myself, I felt like this pressure of like, I have this one purpose I'm here for. I have this one thing that I'm here to do, and why can't I figure it out? And now I see purpose as clearing out anything that isn't me, coming home to like who I truly am, living in alignment with my soul, living in alignment with my true essence. And then my purpose is to just be me. Like my purpose on this planet is to actually be me. And in everything that I do, from this podcast to coaching to my containers to being with my daughter, like my purpose then threads and like ripples into everything I do. So I see it as like my purpose on this planet isn't this, because then it can become really attached to like career or what we do, and become very intertwined. And so it's like my purpose is to become as much as the authentic me as possible, and then I will light up the world in the way that I can. So that's how I see purpose.
I love that. What makes you feel the most alive?
Fresh flowers, which are right beside me right now. My daughter, for sure. Being by the ocean, like being in ocean, like what comes to mind right now is Maui, like being in the ocean waves, and like just being by the ocean in general, and being in the forest. Those are two things that bring me absolute like joy, and I just feel so connected to myself in those moments. And the work that I do, I mean, those are the things that light me up the most. They're like my absolute like yeah.
If there was one thing that you would want the collective to know, what would it be?
The first thing that came in, and I was like, no, that doesn't sound like enough, was you can do this. it was, you can do this. Like, that's literally what came in. And I was like, no, that doesn't, I need it to be sound a little bit.
No, it's perfect.
It was just like, all I heard in my head, my intuitive sense was like, you can do this. Like,
I love it.
You can do this.
I love it. What possibility are you opening yourself up to?
Expanding my ability to hold larger containers. By doing my own work and the energetics around that, to really simplifying and honing my, like, what I offer the world. Like, I've been in the past sort of, we'll call it a recovering people pleaser, but I found it really hard to just really directly, as you can probably tell from some of this podcast where I go on tangents, but to just really own like what I'm here to do. And I know that that's here to reconnect people with their magic and to get them living back in alignment with who they are. So, and that's the thing, the cool thing is, like, I don't necessarily need to sell a wealth program or a, whatever program or relationship, because it's all connected. It's the same stuff. And the byproducts of living in alignment with who you are is ease, joy, freedom, wealth. Like, that's the cool thing about it, is that and I know that, and I trust that with everything in my core, because that's what's happened for me. So,
yeah, it's great. I see that. I see it for you, and you're stepping into it. And that's one of my favorite parts, is just watching the journey of you stepping into that. Is there anything else that you want people to know that we haven't touched on today? And I will link up to all your, like, the container, and this will come before you launch that and all that.
I would just say, like, if you're feeling the nudge to dive into this work, or to dive in with any, like, just to, it's never too late. It's never too early. There's always, like, where you are is, like, the perfect time. And like really, like, the world is your oyster. Like, everything is in front of you. You're like you're a limitless being. And I fucking, pardon my French, but I fucking love watching people step into who they are.
Oh,
like,
so good.
Like, celebrating, like, the amount of clients who text me and send me videos, and they're like, I always, celebration's so big, and they're like celebrating, and they've got like a glass of champagne, or they went and done something really big, and just to see people like so lit up, and where they've gone from feeling just so disempowered to lit up, is just like, oh, everything in my body just sets on fire. And it's just like, oh, like,
this is why I do what I do.
Why I do what I do, because it's just, there's nothing like it, right? We are our greatest investment. Like, I don't see one material thing outside of us. It's like, when we see ourselves that way, it's like this, it's like we're the best return on investment we can ever get, right? Like, we're the best. We're like the only thing that's like guaranteed if we see ourselves as that. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, no stock, no thing, because we're the creator of it all. We're the manifester of it all. So if we can clean ourselves up, and we're the generator for anything. So
I love it. Where can people find you?
They can find me at my address. No, joking.
You're like second floor.
Instagram is Christine Banno. Just so at Christine Banno, all one word. I'm sure you can link it there.
Yeah.
My website is probably the best place, christinebanno.com.
Brand new website. Looks so good.
New, yeah. And then on Facebook, I mean, I'm kind of on there a little bit. But yeah, any of these places. I've done podcasts and stuff, but they're kind of all over the place. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your light. And I am just so excited to get this out in the world. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I love you.
So good.
From my heart to yours, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard and the message resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, give us a 5-star rating. And if you think someone else needs this message, please forward it to them. For daily updates and inspo, you can follow us on Instagram at soulbody.co. Until then, I'll catch you next week.